When your nervous system is regulated, you can integrate thoughts, feelings, and actions without abandoning yourself or taking others hostage in your emotional experience. But when you're dysregulated, your teenager can grab the wheel. They pull out the old tools: rebellion, secrecy, overfunctioning, perfectionism, numbing. They may feel protective in the moment, but they take you out of alignment and keep your deeper needs unmet. Because our feelings don't need a defense mechanism. They need attunement. How we get back into alignment in what we're thinking, feeling, and doing is when our action shows up as a response to what the need the feeling is communicating. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it, and let's do it together. Happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome back to Grow with Robin Breckenridge. So last week we had an amazing guest on, Michelle Peters, and she was talking to us about her experience meeting her own inner child and how life has changed for her developing a relationship with that part of herself. And the week before, we met your inner child, the tender, vulnerable part of you who first created many of your survival patterns that we still use today. But today we're moving into a different energy, your inner teenager. And I want you to hear this clearly. Your inner teenager is not just a wounded part of you. They are a protective part of you. They made an unconscious agreement with your inner child. I'll make sure you never, ever feel those painful feelings again. I will handle it. So while your child may have hidden, cried, or tried to be extra good, your teenager picked up more powerful tools because we get a little bit more power as we become adolescents. Maybe those powerful tools are independence, rebellion, performance, secrecy, substances, friends, sex, and appearance. They have more power, and they used that edge to guard your vulnerable child self. So this episode isn't about shaming that part. If you're not catching on, we don't really use shame as a useful tool in being in relationship with ourselves here. It's about recognition, because when you truly see your inner teenager, you can stop being run by their defenses and start relating to them with compassion, structure, and, yep, you guessed it, boundaries. So before we dive in, I'm going to give you guys another gentle reminder, same reminder I gave you on the inner child episode. Exploring these parts of yourself can stir up very strong emotions and trauma. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel re-traumatized, please pause. Set it down and come back to it another time, or bring it into therapy, coaching, or another professional safe container of support. Okay, this is definitely not a pass-fail, like, oh, I'm even more messed up because I can't do these things on this podcast without getting upset. This is about data and data on yourself. And if anything feels overwhelming or re-traumatizing, you are worthy of support and guidance. I have been very honest from the beginning of this podcast that I did not do this work on my own. I don't think we can. So if at all this feels activating, or if it's intriguing you more, like, wow, okay, we're kind of touching the surface here on the podcast, I'd really like to dive in more. please find a therapist, a coach, ask around, and go get the support that you need. Remember, this work is not about forcing anything. It's about listening to yourself and meeting yourself where you are, and honoring your capacity is part of the healing. So I gave an invitation a couple times on the podcast to get a picture of yourself as a child and put it up somewhere that you can see, because we are going to start to develop a relationship with that part. Well, I'm going to give you another invitation. I would like you to find a picture of yourself as a teenager. Now, teenager really means any time throughout your adolescence. So really like 13 to 19, but keep in mind, and I think I mentioned this in the inner child episode, everybody's different. Like I know some people whose adolescent behavior started very young because they had to grow up really fast. So there is no like hard and fast rule book with this, but if you generally just look at the time that you were a teenager, that's great. And remember, we're trying to find the essence of this time. So it's not like you have to find the picture of that one age that you remember certain things happened in your life or things started to change. We're really just looking at that time of your life and having that picture just represent it. So print it if you can, or if you have an actual copy of it, put it up somewhere. You can put it next to the picture of your inner child. You can put it wherever you want, but let's keep it visible. Why? Because your inner child is still alive in you. The essence of that part of you energetically still lives in your body. They carry both your fire and your fragility. They may have rolled their eyes, stormed off, or pushed boundaries. Or if you're anything like me, one of my telltale signs that my inner teenager is behind the wheel is when I slam doors. Yep. I found that out one time when I just went and hurled a door shut and went, oh goodness, there she is. So they are still a part of your nervous system today. Look into their eyes in the photo. Notice their strength, their innocence, their longing, their edge. That's who we're meeting today. So somewhere along the way, we made an agreement with that part of self. That part made us a promise. I will protect us from ever feeling powerless, unseen, or not good enough ever again. How did that part keep that promise? By building defenses. So if your child felt not good enough, your teen might have perfected your grades, your looks, your performance. If your inner child felt controlled, your teen would show up with rebellion. Maybe you smoked cigarettes, drank, or snuck out. If your inner child felt judged, maybe your teen went secretive and started living a double life. If your inner child felt unaccepted, maybe your teen sought belonging and love through sex, fitting into cliques or risky friendships. If your inner child felt neglected, maybe your teen stole, raged, or acted out to finally be noticed. These weren't flaws. They were brilliant survival strategies, but carried into adulthood, they often morph into patterns that block intimacy, authenticity, and our peace. So I want to pause here and I want to be very honest. In fact, there was an episode, a guest episode that really stands out in my mind with the guest that I had. Her name is Katie Parisi. And we kind of just naturally gravitated to talking about our inner teenagers. And Katie and I had similar inner teenagers. Ours were a little bit wild, a little rebellious, very, very, very feisty, and kind of hard to control and parent when that concept was brought to my attention. So for a long time, I actually hated my inner teenager because she was the one that was causing me a lot of drama in my life. She was the one that I kind of blamed for repeating the same patterns over and over again, even though logically I knew better, or I knew that I wanted to stop them. And I didn't see her as a protector. I saw her as the part of me that ruined things, made bad choices, and embarrassed me and caused me a lot of shame. And when I thought of my teenager, I thought of rebellion, drama, and behaviors that didn't line up with the woman that I wanted to be as an adult. I felt a lot of shame around her and her behavior. And to be quite frank, I just judged the living shit out of her. And then there was a time in my life where I got to spend some time with my niece, and she was just fresh into her teenage years at that time. And I saw so much innocence in her. When I looked back on my inner teenager, I didn't see a lot of innocence because we acted grown then, I mean, we were doing a lot of grown things. And so I didn't feel like a child. It didn't feel innocent. If I felt pretty tough. And I know that any of my friends or anybody that went to high school with me, it's kind of an ongoing joke. Of how tough I was and how many like fights I would start, which is so different from who I am now. In fact, I remember, I don't know, years ago being somewhere and this girl just started a fight with me for like no reason. I mean, I think she was really intoxicated or whatever. And I like calmly walked away and, got in the car to leave, and I prayed for her. And I remember going, wow, I've really changed, because there was a day there wouldn't have been no praying going on in that situation. There would have been a lot of strong fight defense mechanisms showing up. So anyways, back to my niece, when I saw the innocence in her, I thought, oh my gosh, this person that comes up and does some things that feel out of my integrity. She's just a kid. And I was just a kid, and I was managing some pretty tough feelings at that time and doing the best I could. And so I distinctly remember recognizing certain behavior patterns that came up. I had a very strong fight response in my inner teenager in the way that she would show up to manage some of my problems and my feelings. And I knew that I needed to limit alcohol. I needed to be aware of the people I was engaging with and the places I was going. And I had a lapse in judgment. And I woke up one morning and opened my eyes, and some of you guys might relate to this. And it was like the whole night hit me because there was alcohol involved. And I just was like, oh my God, I screwed up. Like, I've done everything that I agreed with myself I wouldn't do. And I'm trying to be healthy. And it was this distinct moment where I shifted my parenting with my teenager, because normally when I felt shame, I would beat myself up in it. Like, you idiot. I can't believe you did that. You should just never leave the house again or whatever. And I got curious with what was going on with me. And I went, okay, so that's shame, right? Shame for me is always like, go crawl under a rock and die. In other words, detach from whatever it is, like hide yourself. And I thought, well, I could beat myself up, or I could just learn from this. And I thought, well, that feels a lot better and a lot more aligned. I think I'll just learn from it. And I went, okay, I can't hang out with those people anymore. And I have to make sure that I am parenting my drinking around certain people. And it was this beautiful moment where I wasn't against her anymore. I became a parent for her and said, hey, listen, I've got some solutions here. Like, there's other resources that we can apply here. And one of them is that we can learn. And then I thought, okay, well, then that makes shame purpose driven. But I can't fault her for the ways that she showed up to protect me and the inner child in me that had a pretty strong not enough wound. So the very things that I hated about my inner teenager were the ways that she was protecting me with the amount of awareness and consciousness she had at the time. So her rebellion, her feistiness, her secrecy, her perfectionism, It wasn't random. They were her way of making sure that my inner child never had to feel powerless, unseen, or rejected ever again. But what wasn't fair as an adult was that I was sending my 15-year-old self to handle my problems, to communicate, to find repair or solution in conflict. I have a 15-year-old right now. They're supposed to be trying life on for size and learning, probably not solving all of your problems. So I had to shift. I had to see her as a very young, innocent part of me that was doing the best she could to protect me. Was it misguided at times? Absolutely. Did it take me out of my integrity? Absolutely. But was it rooted in love? Absolutely. That shift has allowed me to move from rejecting that part of self to recognition and compassion. And that reminds me a lot of the last episode with Michelle Peters, where she talked about how she hated her inner child and it was hard to even look at her. So, of course, it was hard for her to give that part of her compassion. So, let's talk about some of the common feelings that you might have experienced when you were a teenager. The feelings your teenager was guarding you from are often the same ones your inner child felt, but maybe with more intensity and awareness. Some common ones are feeling not good enough, powerless, controlled, judged, misunderstood, lonely, neglected, unseen, unloved, left out, feeling like you don't belong, and shame. Now, there's so many more. Of course, like I've said a million times, I cannot individualize this podcast for everybody listening. So this is just a general list. You're welcome to add your own. But remember that these feelings live in your nervous system. And when you touch them now, it's often your inner teenager rising up to defend you. Now, this doesn't mean that we walk around the world and go, oh, sorry, that was my inner teenager. Wasn't me. Like, this is you. It's just that there's a part of you that's using the best coping mechanisms that they had at the time. And it is your job to parent yourself. It is your job to keep yourself emotionally safe. So all of these things that go on in our nervous system, they're like alarms going off. So one thing that I learned is that when my inner teenager comes up, it doesn't mean I'm crazy or unhinged. It means I'm not safe. The only time that girl shows up to protect me is when there is a threat to my safety. So it's a really great thing to start to get curious when you see that part coming up or you look back on something and go, oh man, like the adult me wouldn't punch someone in the face, but yikes, right? It's like, okay, what around you wasn't safe? And it is your responsibility to show up as a parent to those parts. It's no one else's responsibility. But the whole point of this episode is for you to meet this part and start to build awareness. So let's talk about how teenagers protected themselves and you. Here's some examples. Perfectionism 2.0. Now, my perfectionism doesn't look like my drawers are perfectly lined up. It looks like rumination. It looks like procrastination. It looks like things having to be right or they're wrong. So there's a lot of black and white thinking. But it can look different ways for different people. Perfect grades, curated appearances, achievement. Then we've got rebellion. Maybe rebellion looks like drinking, smoking, sneaking out, pushing limits. Having secrecy or secretive behavior or a double life, having hidden relationships, lying, compartmentalizing. Control and overfunctioning. So that might be managing your friends, overachieving, or fixing. Of course, there's isolation. Sometimes there's a little bit of edge in this for teenagers, but not all the time. It might be stonewalling, pulling away, ghosting, giving the silent treatment, numbing. That's using substances. Obsession with music, screens, food. Again, the list goes on and on. These are just some common ones. Black and white thinking, all or nothing, right, wrong, good, bad, ride, die. Fighting or proving, that might be arguing, defending, proving your worth. Clinging or people pleasing might look like risky relationships, chasing approval, chasing attention, sexual validation, obsessive thinking, rumination, going into fantasy thinking, which is a very common one for this age, looping on conversations. And here's something really important to note. Like, generally speaking, this is the part of you that might get a little feisty. It might get a little rebellious, but not every inner teenager shows up wild and rebellious. Sometimes the ways your teenager survived was by doing it, quote unquote, right, by becoming the good one, the pleaser, the achiever. Maybe you learned that if you followed the rules, stayed quiet, or kept it all together, you'd stay safer. So I want to name this. If your teen wasn't like mine, loud, disruptive, aggressive, but instead was the responsible one, the helper, the one who kept the peace, that too was a survival strategy. That too was your inner teenager protecting you. And just like the wild, rebellious teen, the good one grows into an adult too. But their protector energy looks different. Instead of pushing limits, they might double down on performance, perfectionism, or overfunctioning. They may keep their rebellion hidden under the surface. So I want to make sure that I'm giving a broad view that sometimes we have that rebellious kind of overt teenage energy, and sometimes it looks a lot different. When your nervous system is regulated, you can integrate thoughts, feelings, and actions without abandoning yourself or taking others hostage in your emotional experience. But when you're dysregulated, your teenager can grab the wheel. They pull out the old tools: rebellion, secrecy, overfunctioning, perfectionism, numbing. They may feel protective in the moment, but they take you out of alignment and keep your deeper needs unmet. Because our feelings don't need a defense mechanism. They need attunement. How we get back into alignment in what we're thinking, feeling, and doing is when our action shows up as a response to what the need the feeling is communicating. So if it's shame, for instance, and we think, I shouldn't have done that last night. I feel shame. What do? I beat myself up. That's not in alignment with what the feeling is communicating. And I'm going to do a whole episode on what feelings are communicating. But shame, for example, is love's calling you back to love through self-acceptance. Beating yourself up is not self-acceptance. And it's not that we go, oh, you know what? I screwed up. Who cares? I accept it. It's that we accept that we are human, and that to be human is to make mistakes, quote unquote, which really just means that we are having an experiential time here. We're trying things out. We're learning, we're course correcting, and we're finding out who the F we really are. So ultimately, we want our actions to meet the need of the feeling. Maybe that is protection. And we want to find ways to protect ourselves that are relational. Remember, relational means that you have the ability to pause and consider how your behavior impacts yourself and other people. Now, did my teenager protect me? She did. Did it take me outside of my integrity? It did. Did it grow more of the very feeling I wanted to experience less of, which is shame? It sure did. And that is why it didn't work. And that is why now I try as hard as I can, but again, I am human, to allow my teenager to be a teenager within me, not show up to my conflicts, not tell somebody what I think about them or hide or numb, etc., but to be a teenager. Like, she is the most fun energy I have on board. Man, she's a blast, but she does need some parenting, and she does need some healthy ways of having fun, which I'm still learning how to do. And it's actually a blast. Like, I just went to such a fun party in Idaho. I know I mentioned it on the podcast, and it was such a blast. And they had country line dancing. Now, I'm from Michigan. I guess there's a lot of people that are like into country music and things here. I don't know. I'm from like a suburb of Detroit. We weren't, but oh my gosh, is country line dancing so fun. And oh my gosh, is it so hard if you have a neurodivergent brain like me. So I've decided, like, I'm going to take country line dancing lessons, which just seems like so far off from my personality. I'm kind of more of like a hip hop type of gal. Anyways, I'm like, how fun. I can learn something new. Guess who I'm sending to do that? My inner teenager. I'm going to take piano lessons coming up. Guess who I'm sending? Her. She's a beast. She's not afraid of anything. And now I can send her to go do this podcast and to write things and create things and show up to sessions that I have no idea what I'm getting myself into, versus the other things that she used to find fun that are no longer aligned with the level of consciousness and awareness that I have. So we are going to talk more about ways to reparent these parts of self and specific actions that we can take. But today is more about meeting that part. But I do want to mention something, that sometimes your inner teenager needs a timeout. This is not punishment. It's not containment. And everyone is different. Like, some people, it's like you need to put your inner child in timeout. For me, I needed to put my inner teenager in timeout, and she needed a timeout chair. I literally had a chair in my house. I do not anymore, but in the very beginning of this work, I had a chair in my house that I loaded up with things that, like, my inner teenager liked. Like, I loved word searches. I think I had a playlist that I had on there. I had like books and things that were of interest to her. And there were times where, like, I mean, I definitely remember, especially as someone who grew up with ADHD, where my teacher, one in particular in elementary school, would make me sit on my hands so that I would stop moving or stop touching other people. But in a way, it's kind of like that, like, sit down, take your hand off the phone or whatever it is that, you know, gets you into trouble. Put your phone in the other room and just have your teenager sit until the dysregulation can let up even a little bit. Because my inner teenager, again, this might be relatable, it might not, she needed boundaries. She needed a pause before the explosion, the spiral, or the self-sabotage. So when you notice your teen is taking over, you can put them in a chair. If you're not somewhere where you can access a chair, you can close your eyes and see yourself there and say something like this: I see you. I know you are here to protect us and you're doing the best you can. But let's sit here for a moment, because we're not making choices from this place. This place harms us. Let's do this instead. Now, listen, if somebody told me back in the day when I was learning how to parent this part, like, just tell her to, like, sit in a chair and, like, take it easy, I mean, that just, like, would not have worked. But I'm not telling you this is the end all be all solution. But listen, guys, we have to pause this part of self some way, somehow, whether it's journaling, a timeout chair, whether it's eating the invisible popcorn, any of the tools that we've learned on this podcast. The only way that we can do it differently is to be able to acknowledge that the behavior that we use to manage and tolerate our feelings is not helping anymore. And seriously, I mean, it is the number one thing I get when I have consults with people is they say, I want to stop repeating the same patterns. Repeating the same patterns is like, it is crystal clear to me that you need to have a different relationship with the parts of self that are vulnerable and the parts of self that show up to protect you. So here's where we start. So listen, I have told people some crazy ideas. You guys haven't even heard the Pledge of Allegiance one yet. Yeah, I give that one, which is when you are really in hardcore when you are in some serious rumination, you tell yourself the Pledge of Allegiance because it stops the rote memory, it stops the rumination, kicks into rote memory, and just creates some sort of pause in your thinking. Now, that is for sure the craziest piece of advice. Do you know how many times I have sat on my bathroom floor or my closet floor and recited the Pledge of Allegiance? A bunch. Do you know how many times I've given that advice to people and they're like, that is the most absurd advice. And then they call me and go, I was saying the Pledge of Allegiance because I was so upset. So listen, some of this advice is going to sound crazy, like a timeout chair. But listen, when in doubt, do it different. Get some information. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but we got to pause. So one other thing I want you guys to keep in mind, and again, we're going to talk about this in future episodes where I'm going to, dive specifically into how do we reparent and take care of these parts of self. But I want you to keep this thought in mind. Parenting your inner teenager is different than parenting your inner child, depending on the type of energy of that part of self. Like, I cannot show up to my inner teenager when she's upset and be like, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to figure it out. Now, listen, that's nice. And she needs to hear that there is someone that can steer this ship that knows what they're doing. But my inner teenager has way too much edge. Like I remember when I got a bike and I was like, oh, this is so fun. This is for my inner child. And then, that is just not something that would work for my inner teenager unless I went on some random trail in which I got lost and had to find myself out. And it was very treacherous and crazy and had edge. Like, now that I would send my inner teenager to. But with my inner child, I needed to be softer. There needed to be more play, gentleness, emotional attunement. Now, your teenager also needs emotional attunement and might need some of those things. But what I found is that my teenager needs more structure, challenge, and outlets that bring a different level of intensity in my life. Now, again, that might not be true for your inner teenager. I know if Katie Parisi was here, who was a guest that I mentioned earlier, she'd probably be agreeing with me. So this is relatable to some, maybe not, but you get the gist. Like, it just means that you're going to pull those behaviors that you had when you were younger. So here are some ways that you can show up for that inner teenager. These are super generalized. And again, we're not at the part yet where I've talked about reparenting. So keep in mind, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this, but here's some ideas. Strenuous exercise or sports, playing loud music, or making a playlist of something that you liked. Like, I grew up as a teenager in the 90s. And sometimes, there's just, even though I know music is so accessible, there still is some songs that I completely forgot about. And it's so fun to listen. So it's an awesome idea to make an inner child playlist or an inner teenager playlist, taking singing lessons if maybe it's been historically hard for you to have your voice or you want to try something new and fun. I have never done improv classes, but I've had quite a few clients who have, and one in particular stands out. I mean, I felt like her improv class was like a version of doing this work. Like, I don't know, that teacher was channeling kind of the same energy that I do in this work. So it was just such a profound experience for her. So taking an improv class, journaling, or writing a compassionate letter to that part of self. Creative outlets, trying something new or purpose-driven, high-intensity activities. calling a safe person, meditation, Tai Chi, or any type of surrender practice or a timeout chair. Or, I mean, listen, I think I might have even mentioned this before, but like so many of my clients, I feel like this is such a relatable thing for this part of self. Talk about driving, like how cathartic it was to just drive around as a teenager, that like you now have all this agency and autonomy to like take yourself where you want. So I know that it's actually really cathartic sometimes for people to just drive around in their car, listen to music, put the top down if you have a Jeep or a convertible, or open up your sunroof if you have that. But all of this, it's not about like checking things off a list. It's about connecting. So I will tell you for sure, you will do some things to try to, take care of or reparent parts of self that just don't land, where you're just like, meh, no. I remember one of my clients like loved, I think it was like to play hockey when he was younger, and he went and tried to play hockey again as an adult. And he was like, no, it's not cutting it. Although for some people that would be the thing. But when you like align with that thing that connects you to that part, it's like limitless inside of you. It's like there's not enough time to do like the adult coloring book or the bike ride with your inner child. I mean, these are the parts of self that shift loneliness to solitude. And I know I've mentioned this before. Loneliness, I'm not in connection with others. I'm not in connection with myself. And solitude, meaning I might not be in connection with other people right now, but I'm in connection with myself or my parts of self. So just like last time in the inner child episode, I've created a worksheet for you. It's linked in the show notes, and here's how we're going to use it. This is something that I do with my clients. Again, this is a very, very, very individualized part of this work, but I want to give you guys a glimpse into it and have you lean into it. So then when we start talking about other parts of self and how to reparent, I think it will land a little bit better. So the first thing that we want to do is choose a feeling. Now, this is what I do with my clients. It's something that helps me. I always put my hand on my heart and close my eyes. That way we're connecting our body to the emotional experience or memory that we're having. And sometimes closing your eyes and envisioning that time of your life, like when you were a teenager or what you look like in the picture that you select, just connects us back to that time or that part. So you want to pick a challenging feeling that you remember feeling when you were a teenager. And some examples might be powerless, judged, unaccepted, neglected, not good enough. So an example might be, I felt left out or unaccepted when I wasn't invited to the party. And the action, because that's what we're doing next, is first, what is the challenging feeling you remember feeling at that time? And then I want you to think, what action did you take when you remember feeling that feeling? And we're not going back going like, oh, my teenager knew she felt left out at that time. I mean, you might not have even tracked that at the time. We're looking back with the knowledge that we have now. So I want you to think about, what was the action that you took when you remember feeling that feeling? So maybe it was, I felt controlled because my parents were very strict. And what did I do when I felt controlled? I would sneak with my friends and smoke cigarettes behind the school so that I felt free and I had some level of agency and autonomy in my life, which is something that we really need at this part of our life, because this particular part of our life is a different stage of development. It is a stage in which we start to individuate from our family systems. What does that mean? It means you start to become your own person. The values of the family system might not be exactly aligned with your value system. Another thing that happens when we're adolescents, and this is a thing that we kind of globally shame teenagers for, and I'm not really a fan of it, is that in that individuation process, we dethrone our parents, because it is just natural that our parents are like godlike figures to us when we're a kid. I mean, we truly need them to survive. So we put them on pedestals. Like, my dad is the most perfect guy in the whole world, and my mom is the smartest, most beautiful. And then as we become a teenager, we see them through a different lens, and we de-pedestal or dethrone them. And we start to do things like, I see how they live their life. Like, I don't want to take their advice. And then when the parent says something and the kid's like, yeah. And they're like, you will listen to me. It's really that the kid is looking at their parent as a flawed human being. Because guess what? We are flawed human beings. So this particular stage, what is healthy is individuation, that we are raising children that can go out into the world and become who they are. Like, I have said this countless times to clients, that deprogramming from a cult and deprogramming from a family system, specifically a dysfunctional or toxic family system, is the same damn work. And what deprogramming means is individuating, that you find who you are, your value system within a group. And that is healthy. And we kind of, we look at teenagers through this lens of like, teenagers, hormones, when it's really like, this is an active stage of development in which they're becoming their own unique individual self. And that is something that in a healthy family system, we want to encourage. So I have a guest that's coming on next week. I'll preview that in a minute. But we talked about how doing this work in the beginning felt like a betrayal to the family system, because one of the unwritten rules in that particular guest's family home was that, like, it looks good. Like, we don't present any other way. And so doing this type of work can feel like betrayal, but it's not betrayal, it's individuation. We are finally becoming our own person within that family system or that group. And personally, I've lived enough where I've enmeshed with groups. I've been, in culty type of environments before. I want to be an individual in whatever group or system that I'm in. Period. End of story. And I can thank my inner teenager for that, because she kind of demanded it in certain ways. So here's a little stretch, because this part of the work we haven't entirely covered, but we're looking at one challenging feeling you remember feeling as a teenager. What action did you take when you remember that feeling? And then see if in the list of examples I gave you of patterns that still show up in our life, if you can find a pattern that's happening that goes along with that today. So an example might be, I still hide parts of myself in relationships. So we're just, and that's a stretch. If that feels too hard, don't worry, we will come back around for it. But I just thought, listen, you guys are all super smart. If you're listening to this, you are flexing your emotional intelligence. You're showing up with some beautiful intellect. And I thought it's just a really great place to get curious. So look on that list. See if you can look at, okay, I had this challenging feeling as a teenager. I remember doing this thing. And then does that pattern show up anywhere? So the example I gave you guys was, I remember feeling rejected and not good enough as a teenager. And that being something that I think my inner teenager kind of promised my little girl we were never going to feel again. So what did I do when I felt rejected or judged or not good enough? I would fight back often, not all the time. And so what did I have? A fight response. Another great word for that is hypervigilance. I would alter what I was doing to control the outcome of things, either control that I wasn't rejected, or reject you first before you reject me, or humiliate you before you humiliate me. And then I get to look at, where is that fight response or that hypervigilance altering my behavior to control an outcome still showing up as an adult? And listen, back in the day, it was like, woo-wee. It was a lot of places. Okay. So I want you just to get curious about this part. If it feels too overwhelming, just pause and we will come back to it another time. Remember, the step is about awareness. Repair will come later when we meet the next part of self, which is your maladaptive adult. And then my favorite piece of the work, which is connecting to your conscious, secure adult. I also want you to keep in mind, and this is for any and every part of you, the way you talk to yourself matters. Remember, if we have a really loud, critical inner voice, if we are cruel, judgmental, critical of ourselves, and this is the only biosphere we live in, this body, you will get out to escape that voice some way, somehow. And you can't physically leave. So you will leave via your behavior, or you will get into your head. And these are not comfortable places to live if we don't have any connection to the emotional intelligence that flows through us, through our nervous system. So the way you talk to your inner teenager matters. So I want you to think about these as some examples. I see why you did that. You were just protecting me. You don't have to carry this anymore. I've got us now. We can handle this together without blowing up, numbing out, or disappearing. So keep that teenage photo where you can see it. Notice when your inner teenager rises up this week. Offer them a pause, give them some structure, and choose maybe a new action, even if that new action is just awareness, observation. And remember, this part of the work is just about building awareness. We're not repairing entirely yet. We'll come back to this later in the series to help this part of you manage feelings differently. But for now, your only job is just to notice them, learn more about them, see the ways that they are trying to protect you. Because remember, just like the story that I shared about that little kindergartner I had in my class years ago, if these parts of self don't tell us what happened to them or what challenges they're going through, we can't show up with our wiser, more resourced, conscious adult self to help them. Your inner teenager is no different. They need you to listen, to notice, to pay attention, to attune. They need you to become curious about why they do what they do. And over time, when you really see them, you'll be able to lead them differently. Your inner teenager is not a broken part of self that needs to be exiled. They are a fierce, creative, and protective part of you. They carried you this far. I know mine did. Now you get to integrate their energy without letting them run the show. So here's your mantra for this week. I honor my inner teenager. I thank them for protecting me. For now, I listen and learn about them. Soon, I'll show up with my conscious adult self to lead them with truth and love. Now, as I'm finishing this, I'm remembering one more invitation that I'd like to give. I would like you to name this part of self. And this part would have a different name than your inner child. And this is not so that we feel like we have multiple personality disorder going on. This is just because if we have a relationship with someone and we don't know their name, we just identify them with a broad term, you're not going to feel very close. So I want you to name this part of self. Again, we want it to be an endearing name, not something that came from trauma or a demeaning name, something that you feel connects you to that part of self. I'm going to add the exercise to the show notes. So please go ahead and download it, fill it out. You can put it in a little binder. You can put it on a folder on your computer. I don't care, but let's keep it. Feel free to take it further if you want to do more than one feeling an action that you remember taking when you felt that feeling, go for it. But I like to start small because this work is already a little bit on the overwhelming side. So to make things simple and just take one step forward is a giant leap. So per usual, I thank each and every single person who is brave enough to listen to this podcast, to show up to this type of work. Courage is the number one thing that we need to access to create the type of change that you're looking for in your life. So guess what, boo? We already got that. Every person listening is accessing courage right now. So I have an amazing guest lined up for next week. His name is Josh Radnor. You might know him from a show called How I Met Your Mother, so many other various shows, movies, Broadway, music. This guy has done it all. I recorded our episode last week and I was reading through his bio and it took me about, 5 minutes just to go through the bio. I mean, he is such an accomplished human being. But in addition to that, he's done some really, really hard work on himself and his life has significantly improved. And so I cannot wait for you guys to listen to that episode. We're going to talk about a lot of things. One of the things that we are going to touch on is the inner teenager. So for now, take care of yourself. Look for that part of self this week. I'll see you next week with Josh. And then after that, we're going to talk about the next part of self, which is your maladaptive adult, which would be the part of you that has logic on board, but only has the resources to manage challenging feelings that you used as a child and a teen. This is the super frustrating part of us that knows better because it has logic, but will hit the F it button because it doesn't have healthier resources on board, even if we logically know it. Because remember, feelings aren't logical. That's where we get into some inner conflict with ourselves. Our head knows something, but our nervous system hasn't caught up to that yet. So I'm so excited to continue this series. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you soon. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.